3 years of marriage had taught me that happiness rarely arrived through grand gestures. It lived in ordinary routines. The quiet cup of coffee Evelyn placed beside me before leaving for morning training. The handwritten notes she tucked into my briefcase before business trips. The evenings when we sat on the porch saying almost nothing because words weren't necessary. Those moments mattered more than expensive gifts ever could. Still, anniversaries deserve to be remembered. Especially this one, our third. For weeks, I had planned everything in secret. I reserved the same private dining room at Beaumont House, the elegant restaurant where we had celebrated our wedding reception. The manager still remembered us. When Major Carter walked through that door, he said with a smile, "She'll think she stepped back 3 years." That was exactly what I wanted. Fresh white lilies decorated the room, just as they had on our wedding day. Soft candlelight reflected against crystal glasses. Even the pianist had agreed to play the same piece that accompanied our first dance. In my jacket pocket rested a small velvet box. Inside wasn't jewelry. Evelyn already owned enough elegant watches and necklaces. Instead, I had commissioned a custom silver compass. Its cover carried a simple engraving. No matter where duty sends us, home is wherever we're together. As the evening approached, I found myself smiling for no reason at all. I checked my watch. 6:45. She would arrive in 15 minutes. The waiter poured sparkling water into 2 glasses. "Would you like to order appetizers while you wait, sir?" "I'll wait for my wife." He nodded politely. Of course. The restaurant gradually filled with other couples. A family celebrated someone's birthday across the room. Near the windows, an elderly husband gently helped his wife into her chair before taking his own seat. Watching them made me smile. I hoped Evelyn and I would grow old with that same quiet understanding. At exactly 6:58, my phone vibrated. Her name appeared on the screen. I answered immediately. "Hey." Her voice sounded rushed. "I'm so sorry." My smile faded slightly. "Everything okay?" There was an unexpected military reunion. I frowned. A reunion? Captain Daniel Hayes just returned from an overseas assignment. Several officers organized a dinner at the last minute. I really need to be there. For a moment, I looked at the empty chair across from me. I understand. I know tonight is important. I'm truly sorry. Can we celebrate another day? There was a pause before I answered. Of course. You don't sound convinced. I'm just disappointed. I know. I'm sorry. We'll make it special this weekend. I'd like that. I have to go. I'll call you later tonight. Drive safely. You too. The call ended. For several seconds, I continued staring at my phone. The dining room suddenly felt much quieter than before. The waiter approached carefully. "Will your guest be joining you later, sir?" I slowly shook my head. "I'm afraid not." His expression softened. "I'm sorry to hear that." "No worries. Sometimes life has other plans." He offered to package the dessert I had pre-ordered. I thanked him but declined. There didn't seem much point anymore. Picking up the small velvet box, I slipped it back into my jacket pocket. The silver compass would have to wait for another anniversary dinner, or so I believed. After thanking the restaurant staff for their kindness, I quietly settled the bill. The manager apologized several times, insisting they would gladly honor my reservation on another evening. I assured him it wasn't necessary. None of this was the restaurant's fault. Stepping outside, I paused beneath the warm lights hanging over the entrance. The night air carried the scent of fresh rain, and the streets glistened beneath rows of street lamps. I unlocked my car and carefully placed the small velvet box on the passenger seat. For a moment, I simply sat behind the steering wheel without starting the engine. Disappointment lingered in my chest, but I reminded myself that military life rarely followed personal schedules. Unexpected assignments, emergency meetings, last-minute changes. They had always been part of Evelyn's career. I had accepted that long before we married. With a quiet sigh, I started the car and eased away from the curb. The road home led past several restaurants and cafes that lined the city's historic district. Traffic moved slowly, forcing me to stop at nearly every intersection. As I waited at a red light, my eyes wandered toward the brightly lit windows of a nearby restaurant. At first, I wasn't paying attention. Then I recognized a familiar laugh. My hands tightened slightly around the steering wheel. There, seated near the large front window, was Evelyn. She wasn't wearing her formal dress uniform. Instead, she had changed into the navy blue dress she often wore for special evenings. The same dress I had admired when she tried on a week earlier. Across from her sat a man in a military jacket with captain's insignia resting neatly on the chair beside him. Captain Daniel Hayes. His photograph had appeared several times in military newsletters after his overseas deployment. He leaned forward as he spoke, smiling broadly. Evelyn laughed in return. Not the polite smile she often gave at official functions. A genuine laugh. Relaxed. Comfortable. Unhurried. The kind of laugh I had hoped to hear across our anniversary table that evening. The traffic light turned green. Cars behind me began moving. I could have parked. I could have walked inside. I could have asked the question echoing through my mind. Instead, I kept driving. Not because I lacked the courage to confront them. Because I knew that arguments held in crowded restaurants rarely uncovered the truth. They only created scenes people remembered for the wrong reasons. If there was an explanation, it deserved to be heard calmly. If there wasn't, no public confrontation could repair what had already happened. By the time I reached home, the anniversary gift still rested unopened beside me. Inside the quiet house, the dining room table remained exactly as I had left it that morning. 2 candles waited beside a bottle of wine. A framed wedding photograph stood in the center. In the picture, Evelyn and I smiled at one another with complete certainty about the future. I picked up the silver compass and turned it. Over my hands, the engraved words caught the light. No matter where duty sends us, home is wherever we're together. Tonight, those words felt strangely heavy. I placed the gift back into its box and set it gently inside a drawer. Not hidden, not discarded, simply waiting. Then I sat alone in the silent living room, listening to the ticking of the clock. People often believe marriages end because of one dramatic betrayal, one explosive argument, one unforgettable mistake. But as I replayed the evening in my mind, I realized something far more painful. The deepest wounds are rarely caused by a single dinner. They are created by the quiet choices people make about where and with whom they spend the moments that were meant to belong to the ones waiting faithfully for them at home. That I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was angry. Anger burns hot and fast. What settled over me was something quieter. Disappointment. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the empty chair waiting across from me at Beaumont House. Then I saw Evelyn laughing through the restaurant window. Neither memory left much room for sleep. Just before sunrise, I walked into the kitchen and made coffee. The house was silent. Evelyn had texted shortly after midnight. I'm staying on base tonight. Long debrief after the reunion. We'll talk tomorrow. Love you. I stared at the message for a long time. There were no accusations in my mind. No rehearsed speeches. Only one question. If last night truly had been an unexpected military reunion, why had she changed into the dress she had planned to wear for our anniversary dinner? I realized something then. The answer no longer mattered as much as it should have. Trust isn't destroyed only by lies. Sometimes it disappears the moment you begin questioning every explanation. I finished my coffee and walked upstairs. Our bedroom looked exactly as it always had. Her neatly folded military uniforms occupied one side of the closet. My suits hung on the other. Photographs from vacations and family gatherings decorated the dresser. 3 years of ordinary life filled every corner of the room. I opened a suitcase, not because I wanted to leave dramatically, because I had already made my decision. Months earlier, an international engineering organization had offered me the opportunity to lead a humanitarian infrastructure project overseas. The assignment would involve designing water systems, rebuilding schools, and restoring bridges in communities recovering from natural disasters. It was meaningful work, exactly the kind of work I had dreamed about since university. I had declined it without hesitation. The project required at least 2 years abroad. I hadn't wanted to spend that much time away from my wife. Now the email remained archived in my inbox. I reopened it. The final line still read, "If your circumstances change, our offer remains open until the end of this month." Today was the final day. I dialed the project director's number. He answered almost immediately. "Michael, Good morning, David. I wasn't expecting your call. I know. There was a brief silence. I'd like to ask whether the position is still available. Another pause. It is. I'd like to accept. His voice brightened. We'd be honored to have you. We'll begin the paperwork immediately. After ending the call, I stood quietly beside the window. The decision should have felt difficult. Instead, it felt strangely peaceful. Not because leaving hurt less, because staying no longer felt honest. I wasn't running away from Evelyn. I was walking toward a future neither of us could build together anymore. Returning to the bedroom, I packed only what truly belonged to me. Clothes, books, my grandfather's watch, the silver compass I had never been able to give her. Everything else remained untouched. This apartment had been our home. It deserved better than becoming a battlefield over furniture and memories. The final thing I reached for was a sheet of stationery from the desk drawer. If I left without saying anything, silence would become cruelty. If I filled pages with accusations, it would become resentment. I wanted neither. I uncapped my pen and began to write. I wrote slowly, choosing every word with care. Not because I wanted to sound eloquent, because endings deserve honesty. The letter was simple. Evelyn, when we stood together 3 years ago, I believed the strongest part of our marriage would always be our trust. Last night, I realized trust doesn't disappear all at once. Sometimes it fades through the choices we make and the moments we decide to spend somewhere else. I'm not leaving because of one dinner. I'm leaving because broken trust cannot be repaired through explanations alone. It can only survive when both people protect it before it breaks. I sincerely hope you find happiness, fulfillment, and peace in everything you choose to do. Thank you for the good years we shared. I'll always appreciate them. Take care of yourself. Michael. I folded the letter neatly and placed it on the dining room table. Beside it, I set my wedding ring. The simple gold band had symbolized promises we had both intended to keep. Leaving it behind wasn't an act of anger. It was an acknowledgement that some promises can no longer be carried by one person alone. I took one last look around the apartment. Morning sunlight filtered through the curtains, illuminating the framed wedding photograph still standing on the table. For a moment, I considered taking it with me. Instead, I left it where it belonged. That chapter of our lives deserved to remain complete, not divided. Closing the front door behind me, I slipped the key through the mail slot and walked toward the waiting taxi. I didn't look back. By late afternoon, I was at the airport completing paperwork for my overseas assignment. As I waited to board my flight, my phone vibrated repeatedly. Missed calls, messages, voicemails, all from Evelyn. I didn't open them, not because I wanted to punish her, because some conversations deserve to happen only after both people have accepted the truth of where they stand. Several hours later, according to the timestamps that would remain unread until much later, Evelyn finally arrived home. She called my name as she stepped inside. Michael. No answer. She walked into the living room. Still nothing. Then she noticed the suitcase missing from the hallway closet. A slow uneasiness settled over the apartment. She hurried into the bedroom. Half the closet stood empty. My books were gone. My watch box was gone. The drawer where I kept personal documents had been carefully cleared. Nothing had been thrown around. Nothing had been broken. Everything had been left exactly as it should be. Except for me. Returning to the dining room, she saw the folded letter resting beneath the morning sunlight. Next to it lay my wedding ring. She picked up the ring first. Her hand trembled. Then she unfolded the letter. The room remained silent as she read every line. No accusations. No insults. No demands. Only gratitude for the years we had shared and a quiet acknowledgement that trust, once broken, could not be restored by excuses alone. When she reached the final sentence, she lowered the paper slowly. Tears gathered in her eyes. She had expected questions, perhaps even argument. Instead, she found an empty apartment and a farewell written with kindness. For the first time, she understood something she had never fully appreciated. Anger can be answered. Arguments can be defended. But silence. Silence leaves a person alone with every choice they made and every opportunity they allowed to slip quietly away. The first few weeks overseas passed in a blur of long flights, unfamiliar languages, and early mornings. Our humanitarian engineering team was based in a coastal region that had spent years rebuilding after a series of devastating natural disasters. Entire neighborhoods still carried visible scars. Some schools operated from temporary classrooms. Several villages relied on aging water systems that frequently failed during heavy rains. The work waiting for us wasn't glamorous. It was necessary. Every morning began before sunrise. Engineers reviewed construction schedules. Architects finalized building plans. Local community leaders met with our team to discuss priorities rather than simply accept outside recommendations. That approach impressed me immediately. We weren't there to tell people what they needed. We were there to listen first, then build alongside them. My days quickly settled into a routine. Site inspections, structural reviews, meetings with contractors, late evenings revising designs to make hospitals more resilient against future earthquakes and storms. The work demanded every bit of my attention. For the first time in months, my thoughts remained focused on something other than my past. One afternoon, I stood beside the foundation of a new elementary school as children gathered nearby. They watched every piece of equipment with endless curiosity. A little girl pointed toward one of our construction drawings. "Is that our classroom?" I smiled. "It will be." She studied the blueprint carefully. "It looks big. It has to be." "Why?" "So every child has room to dream." She grinned before running back to her friends. That simple conversation stayed with me for the rest of the day. Projects had deadlines, budgets, technical requirements. But behind every drawing stood real families hoping for safer futures. It reminded me why I had become an engineer in the first place. Several months passed. The pain I carried from my marriage didn't disappear overnight. Some evenings, I still found myself thinking about Evelyn. Not with bitterness, mostly with quiet acceptance. There have been good years, good memories. Those deserve to remain untarnished. But they no longer define the rest of my life. Healing, I discovered, wasn't forgetting. It was learning to make space for new experiences without allowing old wounds to control them. One rainy Tuesday, our project director called an afternoon coordination meeting. We got a new architect joining the hospital reconstruction team. He looked toward the conference room door. "Everyone meet Sophia Bennett." A woman in her early 30s stepped inside, carrying a weathered portfolio case. She wore practical field boots instead of polished office shoes, and the sleeves of her blue shirt were rolled neatly to her elbows. There was nothing theatrical about her entrance. She simply smiled warmly. "It's nice to meet everyone." The project director gestured toward me. "Michael leads our infrastructure coordination. You'll probably be working together quite a bit." She extended her hand. "I've reviewed several of your bridge designs." I shook it. "I hope that's a good sign." She laughed softly. "They're excellent. But I do have one suggestion." "Oh, I think your pediatric clinic entrance could use more natural light." I blinked. Most people started conversations with compliments. She started with constructive feedback. Oddly enough, I appreciated it. "Show me." She opened her portfolio and spread several sketches across the table. Within minutes, we were discussing sunlight angles, patient comfort, and courtyard layouts as though we had worked together for years. For the first time in a long while, I caught myself smiling without realizing it. Over the following months, Sophia and I found ourselves working together almost every day. Our conversations rarely began with anything personal. Instead, they revolved around blueprints, construction schedules, and practical solutions. "Can we widen this hallway? It'll make emergency evacuations easier." "The roof needs another support beam. It'll withstand stronger winds." Every discussion centered on making the buildings safer and more useful for the people who would one day depend on them. Slowly, those professional conversations became friendships. We began sharing coffee before morning site visits. Sometimes we stayed after meetings to compare ideas long after everyone else had left. Neither of us noticed when those extra 15 minutes quietly became an hour. One evening, we stood outside the nearly completed community hospital as the sun dipped below the mountains. Workers were packing away their tools while children played in the open courtyard. Sophia looked at the building with quiet satisfaction. It's beautiful. I smiled. It still needs paint. I'm not talking about the walls. She nodded toward the families walking through the grounds. I'm talking about what it's going to mean. I understood exactly what she meant. For them, this wasn't simply another construction project. It meant mothers wouldn't have to travel hours for medical care. Children would have classrooms that remained standing after storms. Communities would have stronger bridges connecting them to opportunity instead of isolation. The buildings mattered because the people mattered. Sophia turned toward me. You know something? What? You always talk about structures. But when you explain why they matter. She smiled. You're really talking about people. Her words stayed with me long after we returned to the project office. Perhaps she was right. Engineering had never truly been about steel or concrete. It had always been about giving people places where they could feel safe enough to build better lives. As our friendship deepened, I noticed something else. Sophia never made promises she couldn't keep. If she said she would arrive at 7, she arrived 5 minutes early. If unexpected delays occurred, she called before anyone needed to wonder. When disagreements arose during meetings, she listened before offering her own opinion. She treated honesty as something ordinary rather than exceptional. At first, I barely noticed those habits. Later, I realized how much they mattered. One Saturday, our team volunteered to help finish a small library beside a newly rebuilt school. After several hours of painting shelves and assembling furniture, we sat beneath a large tree sharing sandwiches for paper bags. Sophia handed me a bottle of water. You've been smiling more lately. I looked at her, surprised. Have I? I think so. I considered the question. Months earlier, I had boarded a plane carrying more disappointment than hope. Now, I spent my days creating schools, hospitals, and bridges that would outlast me by decades. I had found colleagues who believed in serving others before themselves. And somewhere along the way, I had gained a friend whose kindness never demanded attention. I suppose I have, I admitted. I'm glad. So am I. Neither of us said anything else for a while. We simply watched children carrying stacks of new books into the library. The silence felt comfortable. There was no pressure to impress each other. No dramatic declarations. No grand promises about the future. Just two professionals who respected one another enough to keep showing up day after day. Looking back, I would later realize that genuine love rarely announces itself with fireworks. More often, it begins quietly, in shared responsibilities, in honest conversations, in the steady confidence that the person beside you means exactly what they say. Unlike my past, this new chapter wasn't built on extraordinary moments. It was built on ordinary trust, and sometimes that is the strongest foundation a future can ever have. For years passed more quickly than I ever imagined. The humanitarian engineering project that had once been a temporary assignment gradually became my life's work. One completed hospital led to another. Rural schools replaced temporary classrooms. Disaster-resistant bridges connected isolated communities that had once been cut off every rainy season. What began as a single opportunity grew into an international network of engineers, architects, and local leaders working together across several countries. Sophia remained beside me through every stage of that journey. Her architectural designs became known for balancing beauty with practicality, while my engineering team focused on creating structures that would endure for generations. People often praised our projects. We always reminded them that the real success belonged to the communities who had helped build them. One spring morning, we received unexpected news. Our latest regional medical center had been selected for an International Humanitarian Innovation Award. The recognition included an invitation to present our work at the Global Humanitarian Development Conference. Leaders from governments, charities, engineering organizations, and military humanitarian units from around the world would attend. Sophia smiled as she read the invitation. I think we should accept. I laughed. Were you expecting me to argue? Not really. 3 months later, we arrived at the conference. The convention center overlooked a quiet harbor filled with ships carrying aid supplies to neighboring countries. Inside, thousands of delegates filled the exhibition halls. Displays showcased emergency shelters, sustainable energy systems, medical technologies, and disaster recovery projects from across the world. The atmosphere was inspiring. Everyone had gathered for the same purpose, helping people rebuild better futures. Our presentation took place on the second afternoon. Standing before a packed auditorium, I explained how engineers, architects, and local residents had worked together instead of imposing solutions from the outside. Sophia demonstrated how thoughtful design could create hospitals that remained both welcoming and resilient during emergencies. When the presentation ended, the audience rose in a standing ovation. The award itself mattered, but the applause belonged to every worker, volunteer, and community member who had helped transform drawings on paper into places filled with hope. As we stepped off the stage, delegates approached to congratulate us. Several asked thoughtful questions about future collaborations. Others requested copies of our planning models. While speaking with one of the organizers, I noticed a familiar military dress uniform across the crowded reception hall. Major Evelyn Carter. Tom had changed us both. A few silver threads now touched her hair. The confident posture remained. So did the quiet professionalism that had always defined her career. She was speaking with representatives from an international disaster relief unit when our eyes met across the room. For a brief moment, neither of us moved. There was no anger, no shock, only the strange recognition that years had passed since we had last stood in the same room. She excused herself from the conversation and slowly walked toward me. I remained where I was. Sophia noticed my expression. "You know her?" I nodded gently. "My former wife." Sophia's face softened with understanding. She gave my hand a reassuring squeeze. "I'll be nearby. Thank you." As Sophia stepped away to greet another delegation, Evelyn stopped a few feet in front of me. For several quiet seconds, neither of us spoke. Finally, she offered a small, sincere smile. "Congratulations, Michael. I watched your presentation. It was remarkable." "Thank you," I replied with a small smile. "It's been meaningful work." Evelyn nodded. "I can see that." For a moment, we simply stood together as delegates continued moving through the reception hall around us. The years between us had quietly erased the sharp edges of old pain. Finally, she took a slow breath. "I wanted to say something for a long time. I waited patiently. I'm sorry." Her voice was calm, but sincere, not just for missing our anniversary, and not only for having dinner with Daniel. She lowered her eyes briefly. "I'm sorry for every choice that slowly damaged the trust between us. I kept believing there would always be another chance to explain, another chance to make things right. When I came home that day and found your letter," she paused. "I finally understood that trust isn't lost in one moment. It's lost through many small decisions." I listened without interrupting. There was no need. She wasn't asking me to defend the past. She was taking responsibility for it. "I've thought about your letter many times over the years," she continued. "You never blamed me. You never insulted me. You simply walked away with dignity." A faint smile crossed her face. At first, I didn't understand why. But eventually I realized that kindness can make a person reflect far more deeply than anger ever could. She looked at me again. "I don't expect anything from you. I only wanted you to know that I truly am sorry." I nodded slowly. "Thank you." She seemed surprised. "That's all." I smiled gently. "What more needs to be said?" She let out a quiet breath, almost laughing through her emotion. "I suppose nothing." I looked across the conference hall, where Sophia was discussing architectural designs with a group of young engineers. She noticed me looking and smiled warmly before returning to the conversation. Following my gaze, Evelyn smiled too. "Is she your partner?" "She is. She's wonderful." "I know." There was quiet happiness in my voice. Evelyn nodded. "I'm glad." After another brief silence, I turned back to her. "I want you to know something too." She listened carefully. "I forgave you a long time ago." Her eyes widened slightly. "You did?" "Yes." Carrying resentment only keeps old wounds alive. She swallowed gently. "Then, could we ever?" She stopped herself before finishing the sentence. I understood what she was trying to ask. I answered with the same honesty she had shown me. Forgiveness doesn't always mean returning to what once existed. Our marriage ended, and I believe it ended for the right reasons. There was no bitterness in my words, only acceptance. We shared good years, I continued. I'll always be grateful for them. But we've both become different people. Our lives have moved in different directions. She nodded slowly. I understand. I think I knew your answer before I asked. A peaceful smile appeared on her face. Strangely, I think hearing it helps. I'm glad. Just then, Sophia walked back toward us. I introduced them. Evelyn, this is Sophia Bennett, my colleague, and my fiancée. Sophia extended her hand with a warm smile. It's nice to meet you. Evelyn shook it. You too. I've heard wonderful things about your work. Sophia thanked her graciously. There was no awkwardness, no jealousy, only three adults treating one another with respect. As the conference host announced the evening banquet, Evelyn gathered her conference folder. I should join my delegation. I nodded. It was good seeing you. It really was. She smiled one last time. I hope your future is filled with the happiness you've earned. And I hope yours is as well. She walked toward the military delegation without looking back. I watched for only a moment before turning toward Sophia. Ready for dinner? She asked. Absolutely. As we walked into the banquet hall together, I realized that some relationships aren't meant to last forever. Their purpose isn't to remain. It's to teach us the value of honesty, trust, and choosing the people who protect both. Sometimes the greatest gift we can give one another is not another beginning. Sometimes it's the grace to let a meaningful chapter end peacefully, so that both people are free to write happier ones ahead. Exactly 7 years earlier, I had stood in an elegant ballroom, promising to build a future with someone I believed would always walk beside me. Life had taken a different path. On the calendar, that date still marked what would have been my 7th wedding anniversary. But this year, it carried a new meaning. Today was the first anniversary of my marriage to Sophia. Instead of reserving a table at a fine restaurant, we stood outside a newly completed children's rehabilitation center as the morning sun illuminated its glass entrance. The building had been our shared dream from the very beginning. Sophia designed every space with warmth and comfort in mind. Wide hallways welcomed wheelchairs without feeling clinical. Large windows filled therapy rooms with natural light. Colorful gardens surrounded quiet outdoor play areas where children could recover while remaining connected to nature. My engineering team focused on creating a structure that would remain safe and accessible for generations. Every doorway, every ramp, every support beam, every decision reflected a simple question. Would this make life easier for the families who walk through these doors? If the answer was no, we redesigned it. Community leaders, medical specialists, volunteers, and local families gathered outside for the opening ceremony. Children held bright ribbons while parents smiled with the kind of hopeful expressions that reminded me why this work mattered. Sophia stood beside me, reviewing the schedule one final time. You've checked that program 3 times already, I teased. She laughed. I know. I just want everything to go smoothly. It will. She slipped her hand into mine. You always sound so confident. I've worked with the architect. I trust her. She smiled. Good answer. The ceremony began with speeches from doctors and community representatives who described how far local rehabilitation services had come over the past decade. One mother stepped to the podium carrying her young son. He wore small braces on both legs and held tightly to her hand. When our family first learned about this center, she said, her voice trembling with emotion, we were told our son would finally be able to receive specialized therapy close to home. She looked around the building. For many families, this isn't simply another hospital. It's hope. Quiet applause filled the courtyard. Sophia blinked several times, clearly trying not to cry. I gently squeezed her hand. The ribbon cutting followed soon afterward. Together, we invited several children to help hold the oversized ceremonial scissors. Ready? Sophia asked. The children nodded enthusiastically. 3, 2, 1. The ribbon fell. Cheers erupted across the courtyard as families entered the building for the very first time. Inside, every hallway quickly filled with excited voices. Children explored colorful therapy rooms. Parents spoke with nurses and rehabilitation specialists. Volunteers guided guests through sensory play areas, classrooms, and family support spaces. Watching those rooms come alive felt very different from studying blueprints on a conference table. A building only became complete when people filled it with purpose. As Sophia and I walked through the center, a little girl tugged gently on my jacket sleeve. "Mister," I knelt to meet her eyes. "Yes. Did you build this place?" I smiled. "A lot of wonderful people built it together." She looked around with wide eyes. "I like it. So do I." She grinned before running toward a colorful mural where other children were already laughing together. I watched her go, realizing that no engineering award could ever equal a moment like that. Later that afternoon, after the last guided tour had ended, the rehabilitation center grew peaceful. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, casting warm patterns across the children's reading corner. Parents thanked the doctors before making their way home. Volunteers stacked chairs and folded banners from the opening ceremony. Sophia and I wandered quietly through the empty hallways. For months, these rooms had existed only as drawings spread across conference tables. Now they echoed with laughter, footsteps, and hope. Sophia stopped beside one of the therapy rooms. A small painting hung near the entrance. Beneath it was a simple plaque, built through compassion, shared purpose, and the belief that every child deserves the chance to thrive. She smiled softly. "I still can't believe it's finished." I looked around the room. "I don't think it is." She raised an eyebrow. "No." I shook my head. A building isn't finished when construction ends. It's finished every time another family walks through the doors feeling hopeful. She leaned gently against my shoulder. "That's one of the reasons I fell in love with you." I laughed quietly. I thought it was my engineering drawings. They helped. But mostly, she looked up at me. "You never forget who you're building for." For a few peaceful moments, neither of us spoke. The silence between us never felt uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence built over years of trust, where words became optional because understanding already existed. As we prepared to leave, Sophia reached in her handbag. I almost forgot. She handed me a small envelope. "Happy anniversary." I smiled. I thought we agreed not to exchange expensive gifts. We did. It isn't expensive. Inside the envelope was a single photograph. It had been taken that morning during the ribbon-cutting ceremony. The two of us stood surrounded by smiling children holding colorful balloons. Written neatly across the bottom were a few handwritten words. "The best things we build are never made of concrete alone. Happy first anniversary. With love, Sophia." I folded the photograph carefully and slipped it back into its envelope. "I think this belongs in my desk. Next to your old compass?" I smiled. "You knew about that?" She laughed. "You've shown it to me at least 5 times. "I suppose I have." We stepped outside together. The evening sky glowed with shades of gold and orange as families continued leaving the center. Some children waved excitedly through the car windows. Others hugged stuffed animals they had received during the celebration. Watching them disappear down the road, I thought about how different this date had once seemed. Years ago, I believed anniversaries were meaningful simply because a calendar told us they were. I know better now. A date by itself carries no magic. Its meaning comes from the people who honor it, from promises kept, from trust protected, from choosing each other not only during celebrations, but also on ordinary mornings, difficult afternoons, and quiet evenings when no one else is watching. I looked at Sophia standing beside me. She smiled the same warm, honest smile that had first welcomed me years earlier on a distant construction site. Walking away from my past had never been about abandoning happiness. It had been about making room for the life that truly belonged to me. Sometimes the bravest goodbye is not the end of a love story. Sometimes it is the first sentence of a better one. As we walked hand in hand toward the parking lot, I realized that the anniversary I would remember forever wasn't defined by the date written on a calendar. It was defined by the life we had built together, one founded on honesty, strengthened by respect, and filled with the quiet certainty that the greatest partnerships are created not through perfect beginnings, but through faithful choices made every single day.